right, thanks for joining me in another episode of Why Not Go, the channel dedicated to rock and roll, especially the Sex Pistols and punk rock. I've got an old Sex Pistols badge on today. I think I've had it since 1977. And yeah, so thanks for joining me. I love all the comments. First, I just want to mention that I had a few people ask me how we did with Hurricane Milton, which came right over our area of Central Florida. We live in a small town called Mount Dora outside of Orlando, and we were fine. It was terrifying, and we lost power for about a day, but no damage, just a lot of yard work, and some big trees came down in our area, but nothing on our block. So I just wanted to mention that because I had a few people asking me how we did through the hurricane that just went through. So this is our yard debris pile. It's not too much. The city's supposed to pick it up every Monday, but I kind of doubt they're going to pick it up this Monday. I think they probably have a lot more than usual to pick up. So yeah, we have a lot of old trees in our neighborhood, like this one here. So that's a beautiful oak tree. So a lot of neighbors, like my neighbor across the way here, has a lot of yard debris. But yeah, everybody kind of has a pile right now in front of their house. Like this house right here has a pile. Hi, good morning. Walking her dog. All right, so this episode is all about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Museum, Hall of Fame Museum. I'm uploading this video today because today, October 19th, they are having their induction ceremony in Cleveland, where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is. And the inductees for 2024 are, I'll just read them quickly: Mary J. Blige, Cher, Dave Mather's Band, Foreigner, Peter Frampton, the MC5, Dionne Warwick, A Tribe Called Quest, Kool and the Gang, Jimmy Buffett, Ozzy Osbourne. I'm sure Black Sabbath are already in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I'm sure Sonny and Cher are probably already in it too. Big Mama Thornton, John Mayall, Alexis Korner, and Norman Whitfield and Suzanne DePass. I think those last two people might be producers. So those are the inductees today for this year. And I'm sure Patti Smith is very happy because her husband Fred Smith was in the MC5. And yeah, so that's a good one, the MC5. Usually they induct a lot of people, and I usually think, well, okay. So we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland about a year ago, and so I have a link in the description where I have the whole kind of walkthrough. It's about an hour-long video. You can fast forward parts that you don't like, but I just have music over it, and you can kind of see the highlights. It's a big pyramid-shaped building, and so the ground floor is kind of the main exhibit, and you walk in, and there's a huge area for hip-hop and rap, and then you go into the early rock and roll stuff. And but yeah, so my title is Why So Little Punk in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. So, and I'll get into that. And then at the towards the end of this video, I'll show you what there is of punk rock, Sex Pistols, Ramones, and they have a couple other bands represented. So I'll put that in there. But yeah, there's not a lot of punk rock in there, and as I said, I'll get to that in a bit. we happened to be on a driving trip to Canada, and so we were kind of already going through the Cleveland area, and Joe wanted to see the NFL Hall of Fame Museum, so we went there too. That's in Akron. Akron is right outside of Cleveland. And I know a lot of my viewers are probably not in the United States. A lot are probably in Europe and England. I mean, I'm glad we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, but I wouldn't fly there to see it, to be honest. If you're going to go on a trip like that, flying to see a rock and roll spot of history, I would go to Memphis. We went to Memphis, and I absolutely love that. Sun Studios. You see where the first rock and roll records were made, where Elvis first sang into a microphone. He went in there to make a record for his mother's birthday. And I'll show a picture here of me holding one of their original microphones from the 50s. They let people pose with it. It was quite overwhelming, Sun Studios. They have a museum on the second floor, and the ground floor is the original studio. And I was very emotional in that place. At one point, Joe looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" Because it was just amazing to be in that space where rock and roll and basically country and rhythm and blues came together to make the music that we love today. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. And then, of course, nearby, it's only about a 10-minute drive. You can go to Graceland, and that's a full day. That's amazing to see. And they also have some museums there. But I'm not sure I would recommend going to Cleveland just to see the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But if you happen to be in the area, which is what we did, I think it's fun to visit. So the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it was started by Ahmet Erdogan. I'm probably not pronouncing it right. He was the CEO. He might have started Atlantic Records. So he was the one that got it started in the 80s. He started the Rock and Roll Foundation in 83. And then in 1986, they started the inducting people into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And the first inductee ceremony was in New York in 1986. And the first artists to be inducted were Elvis Presley, James Brown, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Ray Charles, Chuck Berry, Sam Cooke, the Everly Brothers, Buddy Holly, and Jerry Lee Lewis. Quite a list. So they did well with the first list. Non-performers were Sam Phillips and Alan Freed were also inducted. And it's kind of interesting because I always wondered, why is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland? Because really, rock and roll started in Sun Studios in Memphis. But maybe, Memphis already has a lot of tourist attractions with, they have blues museums there too, as well as obviously Graceland and Sun Studios. But apparently the Ahmet Erdogan, as I said, he started the foundation in 83. They started inducting artists into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 86. And then in 1995, they started the museum, and they looked around at different cities to try to figure out what was the best one. And a lot of cities, obviously they have to offer money, the different cities. And they looked at New York, Memphis, San Francisco, and maybe some others. And they picked Cleveland for, from what I read, a couple reasons. One, the city was very generous in giving them grants to build the museum. But I always wondered, what is I'm sure there's rock bands from Cleveland, but I always wondered, what is the rock history of Cleveland? And it's kind of interesting because the main historical person from Cleveland was Alan Freed. And he was one of the first rock and roll DJs. And when I read about him, I thought, oh my God, he's so interesting. And so I could see why, it makes sense to have it in Cleveland. He was one of the first rock and roll DJs. he started in Akron, and then he went to Cleveland, and he actually popularized the term rock and roll. I love that. He, I guess the term had been around since 1946, but he was the first one to start using that term on a regular basis to describe this new music that was, kind of a modern rhythm and blues. And he also was a concert promoter, and he called his show on the radio the Moondog House. He called himself the King of the Moondogs. And in March 21st, 1952, in Cleveland, he had they called it the Moondog Coronation Ball in Cleveland, and this event is considered the first ever major rock and roll concert. So isn't that neat? So that happened in Cleveland. The acts were the Dominoes, Tiny Grimes, and Paul Williams. I've heard of the Dominoes, not the other people. But he promoted rock and roll. He played rock and roll on the radio. So it does make sense that Cleveland is a good spot for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum. So you might wonder, like, how are artists inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, I did some research, and you have to be, your first record has to be 25 years old, so you can't get inducted if you're a new artist. And it starts with nominations, and it says that a nominating committee of music industry professionals put in the nominations, and each member is able to nominate 2 artists. Now, I read online that this nominating committee is only about 14 people. So it's only about 14 people who nominate two artists each, so 28 people. So it's a very powerful group. Apparently they're anonymous because they don't want to be lobbied. I'm sure one of them is Jan Werner, who started Rolling Stone magazine. I'll get to him in a minute. And then the ballot is sent to 1,000 other voters who are supposed to be music industry professionals. And then since 2012, they allow fans to be able to vote. And then it says top 5 fan votes are equally weighed with the other ballots. But the whole process starts with 14 anonymous people who seems like they control the ballots, and then people vote on whether they want to go forward with those. And when we were there at the Rock and Roll Museum, there's you can do it online, but we voted. There's like a kiosk there, and you can vote when you're there. And Joe and I both voted for Joy Division. There's a lot of people that are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it's maddening. But Joy Division is one of them, and Joe and I both love Joy Division. And Peter Hook on his Facebook page was urging people to vote for them. So maybe they're coming close to being inducted. Who knows? And, at the end of the day, I mean, I know who cares about museums and awards when it comes to rock and roll, because when I think of the Grammys, I never even watched the Grammys, but when you look at the history of the Grammys, it's pretty shocking. Like the Nirvana have been nominated they've been nominated 7 times, and Green Day have been nominated 17 times, probably because they had a longer career. But I'm sure you can guess how many times the Sex Pistols were nominated for a Grammy. Not won a Grammy, but nominated. 0. So, it's I'm sure a lot of clueless people, and that's just the way it is, the rock, the music industry. So I know it's kind of meaningless, but because it's there, and because they're inducting artists today, I wanted to do a video on it and to show how little punk rock is I'm gonna get emotional. How little punk rock is represented at the not only in the inductees, but at the museum. You can be in the museum and not be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I think punk rock is not not represented in either of those. And you know, after we went through the punk rock section, which I'll show in detail in a bit, Joe had a funny comment. He said, wow, he said, they gave more space to Sheryl Crow's stage outfits than they did to the Sex Pistols and the Ramones and early punk rock. And I said, yeah, I said, you're right, they did. And and I said, you know, it's because the punk rock is still kind of the black sheep of the music industry. And I don't know if you were the black sheep in your family, but I was. And it wasn't because I was, you know, disruptive or anything. I was always quiet, and I did well in school. But I wasn't like my siblings. You know, they thought I was weird. Because I love music. I was always in my room listening to records, and always, you know, just buying magazines, rock magazines. And my parents had never been to a rock concert, and my older siblings never went to rock concerts. So they thought I was kind of, you know, weird. And it was kind of a conservative family, not really religious, but kind of conservative. And I always remember when I went to my family home when I was in my 20s with a friend, and my friend looked around the house and he says, wow, there's pictures. You would think your parents had 3 kids and not 4. He says, there isn't pictures of you anywhere here, just in a couple group photos, but they have individual photos of everyone, but none of you. It's like they're, you know, kind of ignoring you. And I said, yeah, I said, when you're the black sheep, they don't give you a lot of space, you know. So and I just bring up that story because it reminds me of punk rock and the RocknRoll Hall of Fame. It's they don't give it a lot of space, I'll put it that way, which means they don't respect it. And you know, it's just the way it is. It's very maddening. It's very upsetting. But you know, it's the music industry. It's, you know, most of the people, I'm sure, are pretty clueless. I remember even in the 1980s, people didn't really like punk. It wasn't until maybe the 90s when maybe most people thought, oh, I guess I should like it. But most people didn't think it would be around very long. In fact, I'll show you a review that I think is funny that I looked at recently. And so punk rock was, at least by the American press, it was really hated by most in the American press in the 70s and even into the 80s. And I'm sure Rolling Stone magazine is very influential in the RocknRoll Hall of Fame, because Jan Werner is the one who read Lydon's refusal to turn up when they were inducted in 2006, and I'll get to that in a minute. But Rolling Stone, I mean, I never read it in the 70s. I always thought it was kind of an outdated magazine. They didn't have the things that I wanted to read about. I don't think they had much coverage of David Bowie or Mark Bolan, and they had very little coverage of the punk movement because they didn't like it. I think they were just out of touch. And I don't think that's changed too much. I really don't. And I never really looked at Rolling Stone that much when I was growing up. I survived on magazines like this, like Rock Scene. That was a great magazine, and this one, Hit Parader. And then there was also Punk Magazine and Rock Scene and Cream Magazine, but not Rolling Stone. And I'll just to put it in context, just because I know the Rolling Stone magazine is involved with the RocknRoll Hall of Fame, I'll just put up a clip here of a review that they wrote in 1977. I believe it was, October 6, 1977, and it's a review of punk rock. And I believe they're talking about Pretty Vacant. Maybe Pretty Vacant had just come out. And it's very scathing, and it just shows like what the mentality was. Most of us are familiar with the antics that surround British punk rock or new wave, concert riots, bizarre clothing, outraged government officials and even assaults on musicians by an angered public. A fascinating and somewhat frightening social development, no question. But what does the music sound like? Rarely is this explored, and it's easy to see why. By intention, the music is overly simplistic and rudimentary. It's also not very good. Can you believe that? This person, what's his name? Charlie Walters. He's not just saying the Sex Pistols aren't good. He's saying that punk rock in general is just not good. And this is October '77. I mean, it wasn't like it was, the scene was brand new. It had been going for a while. The Sex Pistols had been going for 2 years. And then this person goes on to write, punk rock's roots stretch back to such American groups as the Velvet Underground and the New York Dolls. Usually the songs are short, the tempo's fast, the chord changes few and basic, the melodies obscure, the tonal variation slight, and the volume high. The players aim for the most power with the fewest simplistic sources. The result is just more heavy metal sludge with an extra shot of adrenaline. Minimalism can indeed work. The Ramones are a good example, but not at the hands of most current punk groups. And then he goes on to say the Pretty Vacant is a disappointment coming off the angry excitement of God Save the Queen. And then he just goes on to say more negative things. And then at the end, he says, rock and roll is many things, musical and otherwise, and punk rock does retain much of the traditional spirit and motivation, but it's not enough and never has been. The rockers who have wielded the greatest cultural influence, Presley, Barry, the Beatles, and Dylan, and many more, did so primarily through music that could stand the test of time. Without such music, few would have paid any attention in the first place. Herein lies punk's likely fate. Musically, it offers too little, even considering the possibilities of the Clash. As interesting as the idea behind people like the Sex Pistols, Johnny Rotten is, the music is ultimately disappointing. And that's the most important part of all this, as simple as it may sound. Rock and roll will surely stand. Today's punk rock probably won't. So that's Rolling Stone in 1977. Punk rock is not going to last. So so that was their attitude then, and I'm sure in a lot of people in the music industry, they have to kind of begrudgingly give it a little bit of space in the inductees or in the museum, but I think it's very begrudging. I don't think these people, whoever these 14 or so people that really do the nominating, punk rock is not at the top of their list. So as I said earlier, when Joe and I were at the museum, we voted for Joy Division, which I think is just a crime because they've been eligible for at least 20 or so years. You have to be I guess it's your first album has to be at least 25 years old, and I think Unknown Pleasures came out in '79, so they've been eligible for a long time. So that's a tragedy. And the strange thing is, Nine Inch Nails, who I don't even know if they would have existed without Joy Division. I don't know. They were inducted in 2020, and in the museum they have almost a whole floor. The museum gets sort of more narrow at the top because it's shaped like a pyramid, but they have a big space at the top just devoted to Nine Inch Nails. There's concert footage everywhere and different instruments and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Nine Inch Nails are okay, but they're no Joy Division. So I just thought I would, just to put it in context, a few people that are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and who are eligible, besides Joy Division. The New York Dolls, I mean, they should be there. it's interesting. The Go-Go's are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but Devo and the B-52s are not. So it's so haphazard. Oasis are not in there. Radiohead are not in there. Jethro Tull, Iron Maiden, The Smiths, Motorhead. Billy Idol's not in there. I'm surprised he's not. Bad Company, Soundgarden. I'm sure there's more, but that's just a few that I found that were eligible and are not in there. And but to me, I don't know. Besides the New York Dolls, I know the Velvet Underground are in there, and obviously the Stooges. But to me, Joy Division, that's a heartbreaker. They should be in there, and I think it means something to them because Peter Hook was asking people to vote for them on their on his Facebook page. So the Sex Pistols were inducted in 2006, and it's very famous. I'm sure you probably know, but this guy here did not want to show up. He, I guess he made the decision that they. I guess he could make that kind of decision that they didn't want to be there at the ceremony. And Jan Werner, who's now in a lot of trouble, this is again the guy that started Rolling Stone. He made some disparaging remarks recently about women not being as intelligent as men, about women musicians not being as intelligent as men, male musicians. So I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has now cut him off. But he was a powerful person before that. So when the Sex Pistols were inducted in 2006, Lydon wrote a letter, and I'll just show a clip here of Jan Werner reading the letter at the ceremony.
Well, as I'm sure many of you have heard, the Sex Pistols declined to join us tonight, but they did send us this letter, and I thought I'd read it to you. This is a fax to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Next to the Sex Pistols, rock and roll and that Hall of Fame is a piss stain. Your museum, urine is wine. We are not coming. We're not your monkeys, and so what? Fame at $25,000 if we paid for a table, or $15,000 to squeak up in the gallery. Goes to a non-profit organization selling us a load of any old famous. Congratulations. If you voted for us, hope you noted your reasons. You're anonymous as judges, but you're still music industry people. We are not coming. You're not paying attention. Outside, the shitstorm is a real Sex Pistol. So, for Johnny Rotten and the rest of them, these will be in Cleveland at the Hall of Fame. And should they come and want them, they can have them, or come and smash them to bits. They can do that too. Welcome to Hall of Fame, Sex Pistols.
So I love it. So Lydon said that he didn't want to go to the ceremony. So I'll put the letter. It's a handwritten letter that I guess he faxed to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'll just read it here. Next to the Sex Pistols, rock and roll and that Hall of Fame is a piss stain. I agree. Your museum, urine and wine. We're not coming. We're not your monkeys. And so what? Fame at $25,000 if we paid for a table, or $15,000 to squeak up in the gallery. So I guess you have to pay to. That's so insulting. The artists have to pay to attend the thing. Goes to a non-profit organization selling us a load of old famous. Congratulations if you voted for us. Hope you noted your reasons. You're anonymous as judges, but you're still music industry people. We're not coming. You're not paying attention. Outside the shit stem is a real Sex Pistols. I just love that. I mean, I don't understand every word, but I don't understand shit stem at the end, but I just think it's so great. I mean, you just kind of love him. I mean, he's just great. I just love it. And yeah, they are anonymous, the judges, and he pointed that out, and I had no idea that you had to pay to sit at the tables there, $25,000 on the ground floor, and then $15,000 upstairs. I mean, that's insulting. I don't blame him. So yeah, and apparently I guess the other members did want to go to the ceremony, but he said, but Lydon didn't want to go. I don't know how that works. You would think that maybe the other three could have gone, but he without Lydon, but maybe not. I'm not sure how that works. Here's a video from a short interview that Glenn Matlock did, where they asked him that question: would you have gone to the RocknRoll Hall of Fame? And he said that he would have.
Decision. I mean, they didn't. What was when they were inducted into the RocknRoll Hall of Fame? They kind of.
I would have gone. I thought it was nice. It wasn't the end of the world or the beginning of, one giant. It was kind of cool. John wasn't happy about it, and he made a unilateral decision. We didn't go, but I was up for it. Steve was up for it at the time. I think it's quite, when you do your 10 yards swimming and you get a certificate, and then you do 25 yards, it's kind of like that, really. It's good to get a badge sometimes.
It's not just a participation trophy, it's more than that.
Yeah. It's kind of, but anyway, when I did go the second time, they gave me my award, which I got home, and Sylvain presented it to me, but I felt a bit bad because I thought he should have had one.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh. What is your relationship with Johnny? Are you? I
haven't seen him since the last gig we did in Spain in 2008. I'm quite happy about that.
Okay.
I think when you. I don't know how long you've been broadcasting, but maybe whatever your first job was, say you worked in an office or something, you don't necessarily keep in touch with Bill in accounts, do you?
Yeah.
Really, all a long time ago. But having said that, I'll see Steve while I'm here. I'm still in touch with Paul. Birds of a feather flock together.
Right. Are you?
Yeah, so I guess the other members, Steve, Paul, and Glenn, they would have gone to the ceremony, and but Lydon said no. So that was interesting. I don't know how that works. I know Axl Rose didn't want to show up for the Guns N' Roses being inducted, and but anyway, sometimes I watch the ceremony. It's kind of fun. If you look up on YouTube, the Blondie one is fun because there's some original members. I believe it's always the members on the first album, and some of the members like Frank Infante and Jimmy Desdry, they said to Debbie at the ceremony, well, how come we're not playing in your band? Because she went and played, right after they were inducted, and they did a couple live songs. And, so there was a bit of a squabble on stage, like, why aren't we in your band now, or why aren't we playing now? And I remember when the Ramones were inducted, that's a fun one to watch, because Joey Ramone gets up there, and I think he said something about he loved George Bush. I guess he was a Republican, and then he kind of fights with Dee Dee Ramone, I think on stage or afterwards. So there was tension there. That's always kind of fun, because sometimes when the bands are inducted, it's a long time ago. Their first album came out, so a lot of the original members on that album are not in the band anymore. They've been kicked out, and it's kind of funny when there's drama. But I liked it when Lydon did that. I love that letter. I think it was great, and people were kind of laughing in the audience when Jan Werner read the letter. But I thought I thought it was great because they are anonymous judges, and who are they? I mean, who's a rock expert anyway? It's like, what, they get a degree in rock? I don't know. So, but yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so I love that letter. I thought it was great, and I like the fact that he didn't show up for their ceremony. I mean, who are these people? And I just loved it. It sounded so angry. Anger is an energy. It sure is. And you were right not to turn up. You were right. I love it. So yes, I'm going to show some footage here of when you go to the punk section, the small punk section of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum. As I said before, you go through a huge area for hip hop and rap. I like some of that. I liked they had some early stuff like Africa Bambaataa and Grandmaster Flash. That was interesting. But to me, I don't know. To me, they kind of their definition of rock and roll. Their definition is a little more broad than mine is. A lot of that stuff to me was more dance music, but it's a huge section, and then you go into more of a vintage section where that's actually very good. You're looking at, and I'll show some pictures here. You're looking at a suit that was worn by, I don't know, Elvis, or they had an old vintage 1950s Harley that he used to ride around in. They had an old piano that was used by Jerry Lee Lewis, an old beat-up piano. They had an old guitar that Bill Haley used to play on. Roy Orbison's sunglasses. That section was very, very good. I liked that. They should have done a whole punk section as big as the rap section, or the early vintage section, or just fairly big, because when you get to the punk section, it was crowded. I think people really wanted to see the items that they had, but as I said, it's as Joe put it, there was more space given to Sheryl Crow's stage outfits. So I'll leave it at that. Okay, so this is what it's like when you come into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, and I was kind of excited because I thought, oh, they have the CBGB's awning there as you come down the escalator, and I know CBGB's had 3 different awnings, so I don't know which one this one is. I hope it's not a recreation, but I know CBGB's had 3 different ones. It's probably not the first one. I'm guessing if it's original, it's probably the second or third one. Could have even been one they used in the 90s or in the 2000s. So, but when I did come down that escalator, I thought, oh, it looks like they're going to have some punk stuff. But as I said earlier in this video, there was very little. So I'm just going to show what there was here. So you go into a big exhibit on hip hop, and then vintage rock and roll, and then you come into a small kind of wall space, and this is what they have on punk. So right here is they kind of just blended in with the 70s, the punk section. They have sort of a platform boot there, but that's not the punk section. Here we go. Here's the punk section. So the Ramones t-shirt there, that is apparently owned by Sid Vicious, or it was owned by Sid. They've got that there. And then they have a God Save the Queen t-shirt here. And I think it's an original God Save the Queen. I know the t-shirts always had the seams inside out, and I can't really tell there, but it's I think that's supposed to be from Seditionaries. And then obviously they have the Anarchy scarf there on the left, and then a Ronnie Big's single there, Sex Pistols, on the left. And that's, let me see, and I think those are leather pants. I'm sorry, I should have recorded the info at the bottom, but I think if I remember correctly, those are supposed to be from Seditionaries. And then that there is a telegram from Malcolm McLaren to Sid's mother, and I think that was regarding his court case. I believe he's requesting Sid's mom to come to New York. I can't remember exactly, but I remember it was something like that. And then I think those shoes are from Seditionaries there. And then I don't know, I think that's a Patty Paladin single there. And then over here is a electric ballroom, Camden Electric Ballroom t-shirt. I don't think that was owned by anyone famous. And again, that's Ramone's t-shirt owned by Sid. And then they have a Dee Dee Ramone bass there. Some Damned flyers, and I think that's a letter from the Damned there on the left. And up there is a leather jacket owned by Joey Ramone, so they kind of have, that's the Ramone section right there. And I'm not sure about that guitar there, I apologize. Then it kind of goes into Talking Heads, Blondie there, I think that's some clothes owned by Blondie. And I believe that guitar there, the Stooges, they kind of, as I said, they don't put a lot of space they don't give punk rock a lot of space, but so they kind of blend everything together. There on the left is a Dick Manitoba jacket. I always like that jacket. And that is obviously from the drum kit of Jerry Nolan, New York Dolls. I thought that was great that they had that. Some television stuff there. And I believe that leather jacket and guitar is owned by James Williamson of the Stooges, I believe. I know that was a Stooges guitar. And see the Blondie album there. I mean, it's not much. And New York Dolls, something from the New York Dolls there. There's Iggy. I love that picture of Iggy. And so that was it. And what was so disheartening about the limited space that they gave to punk, what was so disheartening to me was not just that they didn't have much on the Sex Pistols and they didn't have much on anybody, but the way they just kind of lumped it together. They didn't treat it as if it was its own form of music or an important form of music. They just kind of blended everything together. And if you were just there and walking through it, you would think that the Sex Pistols were maybe just as important as Dick Manitoba, for example. They didn't give any importance or context to the Sex Pistols, or the Ramones for that matter. If they had respect for punk rock, they would have had a whole section on influences of punk rock, and then American punk versus English punk, and then I think they should have had another section or more info on punk in the 80s, hardcore, Black Flag, and punk today. I mean, I think if they had a whole room on punk, I think people would have really liked it, because this part of the museum was actually, that small section in this huge museum was actually very crowded. And because I think people wanted to see what was there. And then I'll just show you next to the punk rock section, they had a little bit on heavy metal right next to this Philly soul section here. I'm just going to go over a little bit more and you'll see there is a section on heavy metal. There we go. So, yeah, I think that jacket was owned by the singer from Judas Priest. Those boots there were owned by Alice Cooper. So that's their bang your head heavy metal section. That was not much on that either. I don't think the RocknRoll Hall of Fame, I actually don't think they really like heavy metal. Oh, that's AC/DC, obviously. Outfit there. I don't think they really like hard rock heavy metal or punk. I think that they have a dislike for all of it, to be honest. That was my take on it. Very little was displayed, especially for punk, I think. And I've learned that a lot of the items in there were they're either donated or on loan, donated from other collectors or actually the owners, or on loan. I don't think they actually buy items for the museum. And so maybe that's why there wasn't much on Bowie, because apart from punk, I thought Bowie was also the most underrepresented. I don't think there was anything on Bowie in there, to be honest. But maybe that's because maybe some whatever collectors or his estate didn't want to donate anything or loan anything to the museum. Not sure about that. All right, so that was all that they have in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum. That was all the space they gave to the Sex Pistols, basically the first wave of punk. Very little, and I think it's I think it's shameful. I think it's shameful, and I think that the powers that be in the music business, whatever the music business is these days, I think that they hated punk rock in the 70s, and I think they hated it all the way. Even now, I think they hate it, but I think that they feel like they have to acknowledge it because it's been around so long. But actions speak volumes, and the amount of space they gave to all other forms of music, whatever you want to call it, not just hip hop, but folk, all other forms of rock and roll. They gave very little to punk rock. And what bothered me the most was that they treated the Ramones and the Sex Pistols the same as any other band. No disrespect to Dick Manitoba, but you might think that they were on the same level playing field. If they had respect for punk rock, they would have had a section. They would have had a room on it. They had lots of rooms on other bands and forms of rock and roll, but they would have had at least a room on it, starting with the Ramones, American punk rock, and then the Sex Pistols with British, launchy British punk rock. And I think they should have had a section on hardcore in the 80s, and I think they should have represented even, whatever, punk rock today. It's shameful. And I also think Lydon's band today, PIL, they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, their sound was revolutionary, and also Susie and the Banshees, and there was no mention of goth music either, and that's another huge form of rock and roll that went unnoticed. But I think that punk, it continues to live, even with the powers that be wanting to keep it down. It is the black sheep of the rock and roll world, and but it continues to live on, and people love it, and rightly so. And I wouldn't be proud of myself if I worked at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, because punk rock, I think, is probably the biggest thing that's happened to rock and roll in the last 50 odd years, and it deserved to be respected. And I think he did the right thing, because he wasn't respected when it counted in the 70s by people like Jan Werner and Rolling Stone magazine. And why should he go there now and pay $25,000 to sit amongst them? He's too good for that. So that's my opinion on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and punk rock. and I thought I wanted to upload this today because today is their day for inducting other bands, more bands, and I think a couple of those I think are warranted in my book, especially the MC5. But most of the others, I don't know. I don't agree with those anonymous, as he said, anonymous judges. And I'll just leave it there. But whether punk rock gets space in the Hall of Fame museum or not, it doesn't really matter. It lives on, and always will. So thanks for watching. Until the next time, I'll be seeing you.